What's up, fanatics? The Mets finally broke the seal last night by trading AJ Minter. Today, they have pulled Freddie Peralta from his start. Major League Baseball players better keep their bags packed because there could be a lot of movement the next few days. I'm Tim Clark, and you're listening to the Musings of a Sports Fanatic, a podcast found exclusively here at PennSports.live. Also going live on my YouTube channel. And before we get started, by the way, gonna have a lot. Spicoli's gonna be busy. He's gonna be busy this week. A lot of stuff to complain about this week on the podcast. So, want to give a shout out to FeedSpot. Let me give them their weekly applause. So shout out to FeedSpot, where they've had me ranked in their top 20 on podcasts. Go to FeedSpot. You can check out a lot of cool stuff from podcasts to other things as well at FeedSpot. All right. So the trade deadline is upon us. Technically 6 o'clock on Monday. I'm taping. This is important this week because things could be happening. I am taping Friday, July 31st at 3 p.m. So by the time this gets posted, if you're not watching it live, it could be there could be a lot of stuff that has happened in between. It's that season. So what is that? It's about 3 days to the trade deadline. And AJ Minter was the first to go last night from the Mets bullpen, and Peralta has been pulled. There's all kinds of teams looking for pitching. The Braves and the Phillies. I think the Pirates should be. St. Louis, who thinks they're still lingering around. There's a lot of the Yankees might need, might look for something. So. There could be a few starters on the move. One of which will be Tarek Skubal. It certainly sounds, by all the reporting that's being done, Jeff Passan and others, Buster Olney, John Heyman, a lot of guys out there that I follow are suggesting that Detroit has determined that they are indeed out of it. That it's not worth it to hold on to a guy like Tarek Skubal. They know that their bounce back's going to be quick. They have a nice nucleus of a starting rotation for next year already anyway, and they're going to get a haul for Skubal. Everyone's kind of hoping that doesn't end up with him in L.A., the rich getting richer. Milwaukee's probably going to make a play. More on Milwaukee when I get to the time machine. The Phillies, maybe. I don't know. The Phillies farm system's not very deep right now. Dave Dombrowski is famous for emptying out a farm system to contend, which they have done. But anyway, so Tarek Skubal's the biggest name out there right now, but there's other starters. Do the Angels trade Detmer off their out of their rotation? So we'll see what happens. Does Mason Miller get moved by San Diego? I don't think so. I never thought they were going to move him. A lot of people did. I think San Diego figures with the roster they have, one hot streak puts them back in this thing. So I don't think they're going to move him. But we'll see. We'll see. So let me see if I can get Spicoli for rant number 1 here. What's your problem? So my first problem, Spicoli, of many this week, Bryce Harper opened his mouth again. The Phillies are slumping. And if you want to listen to someone, I'm not a Phillies fan. So when they start slumping, I start clapping because I don't like them, and it's just the way it goes. Ricky Bottalico, their former bullpen arm turned announcer, or talk show host, I guess, not so much an announcer. Boy, did he rip them. And he said, this slump, when they lost 10 straight earlier in the year, he said, that was bad, but this is worse. He said, because of the time of season, like he said, this should be the time of year that they're gearing up to go try and, maybe win the division and certainly get into the playoffs. And he said, they're just, you know, dumping along. And so you want to listen to someone rip on them, listen to Ricky. But here's my problem. Bryce Harper, and he's always been this way. Now, I've told you in the past on this podcast, I would take Bryce Harper on my team in a heartbeat. He reminded me of the offensive version of Garrett Cole, a guy that would run through a brick wall for you. And I saw a little snippet from an interview he did here in the last few days. With the trade deadline, you might have players saying how he wants new players to feel welcomed and feel like it's a family in Philadelphia, and not feel like an outcast or like people are putting extra undue pressure on you. And he said, I've got an old school approach and mentality to get to the game of baseball. And that part I like about Bryce Harper. And I agree, he does. He plays the game hard, but he runs his mouth. He's going to run his mouth about the negotiations for a salary cap and the fact that there's probably going to be a lockout next season. He's going to be very vocal about that. And he came out this week and said, well, yeah, we need some help. Well, what do you think, pitching or hitting? Both. I got news for you, Bryce. The contract that you signed, I'm pretty sure the Phillies were hoping to get more than 255 with 64 RBIs. Now, 64 RBIs is nothing to sneeze at. But we are down to only about 52 games, 51 games, something, depending on where each team is at. And I would think the Phillies maybe were hoping that he'd be looking at 80 RBIs. But the 255, that doesn't cut it. Not for what they're paying him and what they're going to pay him almost in perpetuity, like, forever. He's, signed through his, age 40? Is that where age 39 season? So maybe Bryce should start putting up the numbers that people expect Bryce Harper to put up before he starts telling everyone what is needed in Philadelphia. I'll tell you what's needed in Philadelphia. For him to hit more than 255, for Trey Turner to hit more than 240 or whatever he was hitting right now, for Alec Boehm to hit more than 245, although somehow hitting his batter 220, whatever he's at, it's a low average, but he does have 50-some RBIs, which he's at least having some productive at-bats, but his defense isn't good. Other than when I watched him play against the Pirates, he looked like a damn Gold Glover. JT Real Muto is starting to look long in the tooth behind the plate. Brandon Marsh's average has dropped down to much more Brandon Marsh levels at 280. Now, that's not, in this day and age, that's like a 300 hitter. But he's dropped, all those, he was in the 330s there for a while. Kyle Schwarber, the home run bat has gone cold. Aaron Nola's ERA is near 6. So, Bryce, if you want to know what the Phillies need, they need their stars to start playing like stars. No one brought Trey Turner to Philadelphia to hit 240. No one brought you to Philadelphia to hit 255. They touted Alec Boehm not to hit 245. Schwarber's, look, he's slumping a little bit, but he's been pretty good. So I kind of have to lay off on him. Bryson Stott's another one they brought up through and is not panning out. Now, I agree with them. The revolving door in right field needs to be fixed. Like, they need to find somebody. But I just find it rich when players come out and say, "Oh, we need this and we need this and we need." What they need, Bryce, is for you to shut up and to start hitting like your contract suggests that you should be hitting. And so I just get sick of that. Players like him. I love to watch him play hard, run through a wall for you. But if he's not getting base hits and hitting some home runs, a little pop in the bat, I I don't need to hear him speak. I think the Phillies to kind of come off my high horse for a minute. I think their window is closing with this group. It's an older group. And again, Dombrowski has traded off a lot of prospects to bring these guys in. Look for more of that here in the next 3 days because if you're the Phillies, you've got to go for it now because there's not a lot of young guys that you say, boy, well, that's okay because we got this guy coming up through the system. Um, that ain't it for the Phillies. And so, Dombrowski's famous for it. This is his MO. He'll bleed your farm system, but he'll build you a winner. He built them a winner. They just when they got to the playoffs, they didn't hit enough in the playoffs to win it all. They got to the World Series, couldn't win it. But it's what he does, and they just didn't quite close the deal. And I think that window is closing. Now, having said that, if they get into the playoffs because of their front three pitchers of Zach Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, and Jesus Luzardo, that's formidable. And if they would come alive with the bats when they hit the playoffs, maybe this is the reverse year, kind of slumping in. And then when the playoffs come around, maybe the bats get hot again. It's not like the Phillies couldn't do something in the playoffs because the front line pitching and then they've got a lights out closer. Now, I think they want to add bullpen if they can because getting to the closer is a bit of a problem for them, as it is for a lot of teams. I'm going to talk about the Pirates in a minute. But, it's I think it's do or die for the Phillies at this point with this group because the young Bohm is a young guy, Stott's a young guy, they're not panning out. Crawford is in his first year in center field, so he might be a guy that you can build a little bit. Real Muto's just about done. Trey Turner isn't just about done, but he's getting up there. Harper's getting up there. Schwarber's getting up there. So we'll see. We'll see on the Phillies, but look for them to be active. Dombrowski's gonna make moves to not because Bryce Harper told him to, but because he knows that roster needs some improvements. Against Tarek Skubal, going to go somewhere. Hopefully not L.A. I wonder if the lockout looming next year. I wrote this in my column this week. My column was kind of more about the trade deadline in general, but I mentioned the lockout because I wonder if are there going to be teams and GMs that say we might miss next year, so we better try and win this year, like Milwaukee, for example. Milwaukee's never won the World Series. And with that Dodger, the Dodgers are like that menacing villain at the end of the video game that you have to beat to win the video game. So that might factor in too. But do the Brewers say we might miss it a year? That'll be a year that we don't get Jacob Mizorowski, on the field. So let's go win now. Or do GMs say, you know what? Let's like the Pirates, for example, we only have an outside chance of making the playoffs. And other teams, not just the Pirates, other teams that are in that same boat. We only have an outside chance of making the playoffs, so we don't want to make any earth-shattering moves where we trade off some of our potential prospects. That if we miss a year next year, we might start to be calling on them in 2 years to come up and fill some of the gaps in the major league roster. So I'm interested to see if that plays a part. I don't know if anyone would even admit whether it does or not. I mentioned AJ Minter was on the move, the Twins, who, look, Derek Shelton, I said a couple months ago, I thought the Twins were going to be out of it. They were going to be done. I still don't know that. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but they have certainly kept their head above water in the playoff race and have a chance. So, all right, let me see, Spicoli. I hope you didn't go outside to burn one.
What's your problem?
I appreciate you sticking around, Spicoli. All right, this might. You know what? My last rant coming up later is it might be my worst one. This one's on the Pirates. Bryce Harper came out and said we need this, for the Phillies, and that rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe you're going to say I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but I wish someone for the Pirates would understand that these games that they're frittering away in June and July and the whole way back to May and April, these games that they're frittering away, they count in the standings too. Brandon Lau came out the other day and said, I've never seen anyone win the pennant in July. I've played on teams where we were just struggling, and then August hit, and we picked it up, and we end up in the playoffs. And he did. That's true. He's had that experience, but that shouldn't be relied upon. Oh, I bet we'll get hot in August and September. What if you don't? What if you just keep playing that kind of 500-ish baseball? Um, then you're going to look back at games. Just this week, they make a stirring comeback last Saturday against Arizona, who, by the way, has a really nice ball club. I sometimes wonder now, after watching Arizona play Pittsburgh, I think the Cubs are in. I don't think the Cubs are going to falter enough to fade out of the playoffs. The Cubs are going to be in. I think the Phillies will be in, although they're not as a sure bet as I thought they were a couple weeks ago. I still think they probably get in. And I think Arizona, they're now 2 games up on the Pirates and the Nats, and I think the Marlins are in there. And now that the Pirates are in trail mode, I don't know. I'm sort of torn on whether they should trade a bunch of prospects. I guess it depends who they would get in return, because I just don't know. Let me get back into my rant and maybe explain it as we go along here. But Lau's comments, and so they make this stirring comeback Saturday against Arizona. And the tiebreakers matter now. There's not a 1-game playoff to see who gets the last spot. They go by tiebreakers, and head-to-head is obviously the first tiebreaker. And if the Pirates would have beat Arizona either Saturday or Sunday, they win the tiebreaker with Arizona, which the way this race is going, that could potentially be important. So they're down 6-0 going into the 8th inning. They score 3 in the 8th, and then they hit a 2-run homer and a solo homer to tie it in the 9th. And then it went extra inning, and they had chance after chance after chance. It was a game where their bullpen actually kept them in it and pitched well. Gave up 1 run the whole game. It had been 5 from the starter, and then the first, I think it was Matson, the first reliever came in, gave up a run. But you've got to finish that job. You made that stirring comeback. You got to put the nail in the coffin, and they didn't. They blew chance after chance after chance in extra innings when the bullpen held Arizona either to no runs or 1 run, and Pittsburgh couldn't get it done, and they lose that game. And then they lose to a really tough left-hander, which the Pirates cannot beat left-handers. They cannot. There's something like 9-23 against left-handed pitching. And again, you want to look at stats when you don't make the playoffs at the end of the season. There will be one to look at and say, boy, why were we so bad against left-handed pitching? And they lose Sunday. So now they lose the tiebreaker to Arizona, and now they fall back in the playoff standings. So then the Cubs come in, and I'm saying, boy, you got to, you want to beat the Cubs. That's one of the teams you're trying to track down. And by the way, I think I have that wrong. I think the Cubs series was over the weekend. Arizona, that was Tuesday night. They made the stirring comeback and then lost Wednesday. But the Cubs series, they did get 1 win. But again, they had chances. They had chances. So if it's not the bullpen blowing games, it's this. Now this offense has gone cold. not just against left-handed pitching. Last night, the Reds, uh, Sluber or Slubber or Jubber or Jobber. He was a jobber. Whoever the guy pitching for the Reds, um, he was a banjo guy, as my buddies and I like to say, and they couldn't hit him. They couldn't hit him. Brandon Lau hit a 2-run homer, or no, I guess it was a solo homer, and then they did scratch out another run. But they should have scored 8 runs off this guy, and so the offense has gone cold. Um, Here's what I noticed: their bad players are smart baseball players. Billy Cook's a smart baseball player. If you're a Pirate fan, you saw that rundown he got into that allowed the runner from first to get to third before he allowed himself to be tagged out, and that allowed them to win that game. That was Billy Cook won that game for them by being a smart base runner. Billy Cook's not a good baseball player, but Billy Cook's a smart baseball player. Nick Gonzalez is a good hitter. He's hitting 315. There's only like 3 guys hitting over 300 this year in baseball. He's one of them. He's a good hitter. He's a bad baseball player. He's bad on defense. He doesn't think things through. They needed him to hit a ball to the right side, which a guy that hits 315, you would think controls the bat and can do that. He swung at the first pitch, which it was an inside pitch. It was actually a ball, and he pulled it to third base. It's one of those extra inning deals. The runner doesn't get to advance. They don't end up not scoring. They would have scored if he would have advanced them on a fly ball that the next batter hit. Nick Gonzalez, good player, but not a smart baseball player. And that seems to be, and that's the thing. That's this team now. The hitters are kind of going south a little bit. But Paul Skeens has become borderline unlikable, for the record. I said it before, and he did it again. Ho-humming about these games. Oh, we'll be fine. We're not. Look, we don't even. I don't even know where we're really at in the standings. Something that's not word for word, but something to that effect. And this was after he did strike out 10 in his last outing, but then he blew up in the 5th inning. And he ended up giving up something like 5 or 6 runs and came out in the 5th inning, raising his ERA even higher. He's full. Paul Skeens, I heard Mark Madden say, and Madden is spot on. The number one reason, believe it or not, as bad as that bullpen has been, the defense hasn't been good. But the number one reason the Pirates aren't currently in a wild card spot in the standings is because they have not got Paul Skeens level out of Paul Skeens. They're getting an average, like number 3 starter kind of output from Paul Skeens. And that's not acceptable from a guy like him. I think he's too full of himself. He thinks he's being funny in his post game and sort of aloof with all his little comments. I think, he's worried about, I know his girlfriend's worried about social media. He went to the All-Star game and they're bragging about their outfits and they're yucking it up about how he picks his outfits and Livy picks them. How about this, Paul? You shouldn't have even been at the All-Star game this year. But all the media, especially the national media, treats him like he's still God. Well, this year he's not. Last year, rookie year, okay, but not this year. And so, but I'm just sick of the veterans in the Pirate bullpen or the Pirate clubhouse acting like these games don't really matter. Wait till we get to August. Then we can start talking about the standings. Well, what if you're out of it by then? And now you better win these last 2 in Cincinnati because Cincinnati's a team you've got to win series against. I don't care if it's on the road or at home. And Mr. Skeens is pitching tonight. So they better. Well, I guess it's a 4-game series. I'd like to see them win the next 3. Splitting with Cincinnati again, treading water. They're 55-55, and it is not that's not good enough. For this team. The offense has been too good, and now the pitchers, other than Skeens, have been coming around. Jared Jones has been lights out. Chandler's been better. Still not what we want, but better. Ashcraft had a decent outing again, and he's been. I know he's had some rough ones there of late, but he was darn good for the whole first half of the season. Mitch Keller's been good since the All-Star break. Skeens is holding you back. And then let me round out this Pirate rant. So trades are starting to get made, albeit just one so far. But Peralta obviously is going somewhere with the Mets pulling him out of their lineup for tonight. He was going to pitch. What is Ben Cherington waiting for? I told you. Think about this. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not. Look, I'm a guy making a podcast here. I don't know the ins and outs. I don't talk to the GMs. But there may have been a chance. Remember when I started saying this? It was back in May when it was clear that bullpen was not going to cut it. I didn't think the bullpen was going to cut it coming out of spring training. I was not a Dennis Santana fan. I was proven right, unfortunately, on that one. Gregory Soto can't be your closer. He doesn't portray any confidence when he's on the mound. He's got the confidence of a sixth or seventh inning guy, not an eighth or ninth inning guy. Now, Mason Montgomery can be your closer, I think. And we can get into that then. But I said coming out of spring training wasn't good enough. And by May, I said, Ben Cherington better start getting on the phone and making phone calls. And that's when Boston was in the absolute pits of hell. Last in the standings and, just dreadful. Fired the manager. And that's when maybe you make a phone call and said, hey, we got this prospect and this prospect for Aroldis Chapman. Now, today, July 31st, Aroldis Chapman ain't going anywhere because not only is Boston, after winning 15 straight, not only are they in it, they are contenders in the American League. They're going to be buyers, big-time buyers. So you could have pulled a trigger there, or maybe there was another guy out there. You could have started looking then. Anyone that thought what you had in the bullpen back in May through June, anyone that is in baseball that looked at that bullpen and thought it was acceptable should be fired. And we all know Ben Cherington should have been fired a long time ago. But the owner doesn't care enough to do so. So he should have started trading or at least making phone calls. And I know, well, maybe he was, Tim. How do you know he wasn't making phone calls? Well, they weren't successful phone calls if he was. And here we are now. One trade happened. Some other trade. This weekend trade. When is he going to get on the line? Is he going to let every relief pitcher and every player that he's looking at get picked by someone else, get traded somewhere else, and then he'll be left with scraps? And it wouldn't surprise me. I know how this goes for the Pirates at the trade deadline. But it's unacceptable that he's waiting this long. Even if Mason Montgomery, which I'm fine if they decide to make him the closer. He's got closer stuff. I said all year, I couldn't figure out why he wasn't more successful earlier in the year. He has looked dominant lately. So if you put him in, you still need some setup guys. You still need some high leverage arms. I heard they're interested in Weaver from the Mets. Go get it done. That would be a great move. Go get it done. Someone even reported today that Murph Gray and Sammy Stafora, if you could get them to take Stafora and hold on to Gray and you get Weaver, I give you a thumbs up on that one if you could get that deal done. But you if he's waiting until Monday at 5:50, it's going to be picked over, and we're going to see Brian De La Cruz, banjo guys again. My friends and I, our term. That's what you're going to be left with. So let me take a breath, and let's get in the time machine and go back to a day when a team similar to the Pirates said, "We're not going to wait. We're going to make a move." See what's in the 8-track. I have my speaker ready this week. China Grove. Sorry, singing along. Doobie Brothers in the 8-track this week, China Grove. I like the Doobie Brothers. Like the Doobie Brothers a lot as a kid, getting into rock music. So, all right, we're going back to a specific date this week in the time machine. How about July 7th, 2008, when the Milwaukee Brewers said, you know what? We're going for it. And what a refreshing approach. And let's fast forward. They didn't win the World Series. We know. I just said earlier in the podcast they've never won the World Series. This trade didn't win them the World Series. Didn't get them to the World Series. But it showed their fans we give a crap and we're going to do whatever we can to win. And since 2008, in the last 18 years, particularly these last, what they've made the playoffs for about 7 years straight. I think I'm right on that. So it's not like this trade gutted them and it devastated the franchise for years to come. On July 7th, 3.5 weeks before the trade deadline, Ben Charrington, the Brewers decided to trade for CC Sabathia, who was in Cleveland at the time. They traded Matt Laporta, Zach Jackson, Rob Bryson, and Michael Brantley to get Sabathia. And I can't remember who gets the credit for saying it first. So I apologize. I can't remember who said this first. But prospects are suspects until proven otherwise. So these GMs, and I know the Pirates have always been that way. Now, Ben says we're not going to be that way this year. Your Murph Grays, your Florentinos, those kind of guys, they might be great prospects, and they might end up having great major league careers. Or they might be like Matt Laporta, Zach Jackson, and Rob Bryson. So Matt Laporta played 291 major league games, finished his career with a -1 WAR. Not a good player. No offense, Matt. Zach Jackson threw 105 innings in his major league career, a -0.7 WAR. And Rob Bryson never made it to the major leagues. Now, Michael Brantley became a 3-time All-Star in Cleveland and then a couple more times in Houston. But while he was in Cleveland, the team that traded for him, he was a 3-time All-Star. He became a doubles machine. He was going to get you 40 doubles every single season. Really good player. Was part of one of the cogs that got Cleveland into the playoffs. Cleveland never won the World Series while Michael Brantley was there. So essentially, the Brewers traded Michael Brantley. This is what it really boiled down to. They traded Michael Brantley and got CC Sabathia, who in 2008 for the Brewers went 11-2 with a 1.65 ERA. And when it came down to the last day of the season and the Brewers needed a win to make the playoffs, he pitched a complete game on 3 days rest. You mean there wasn't a pitch count? 3 days rest, complete game. Brewers win and make the playoffs. Now, they got knocked out in the playoffs, and they end up trading Sabathia to the Yankees. And I should have looked up who the Brewers got from the Yankees. Should have done that to see, but they went for it. They told their fans we're going to go for it, and they said we're not waiting until 25 teams are in this trade, and it's like a circus, and all these phone calls are getting made, and someone else might make a better offer for Sabathia. We're going to go get him right now. And they made an offer that was significant enough that Cleveland said, we're let's do it. And in the last 18 years, you just don't see it happening very much. You'll see maybe like a week before the deadline, a move get made. But teams and GMs, I don't know what you'd have to ask GMs. I don't know what their reasoning is on not wanting to pull a trigger. I guess maybe you're seeing how the season pans out to get closer to the deadline. But like right now, I mean, the season is what the season is. the Pirates are 55-55. They're either going to be the best they could be when Monday rolls around is 58-55, or they could be 55-58, or somewhere in between. I don't know that those one or two games should make you wait 2 more days. If there's a guy you want, go get him. Should have got him last week. Like I said, you should have been on the phones in May to get him. But as I jump out of the time machine, the Brewers in 2008, I should say, they said we're not waiting, and B, we're going to show our fans that we mean business. We are going for it. Bob Nutting, even when they had the 3 wild card season where they won 94, 96, 98 games, or 95, maybe not 96, whatever it was, they were really good teams. But like Marlon Byrd was a nice pickup, but they didn't go out and say, you know what, we're going to go get that golden apple that's hanging out there in the trade market, and we're going to bring them to Pittsburgh so we can go win a World Series. They made small moves. So Bob Nutting has never shown a desire to show the fans that we're going to go for it, other than one time, now that I think about it. Someone talked him and Neil Huntington into thinking they were contenders whatever year it was they traded for Chris Archer. And they got rid of Glass now, Boz, and Meadows. Now, Glass now has been hurt off and on ever since he left Pittsburgh. He's also had some really good moments. Boz, injury issues, and Meadows, mental health issues that I believe have him out of baseball, if I'm thinking correctly. So you could argue that it didn't kill them, but that's the only time and that was when they really weren't contenders. This year with the offense that they have, and keep in mind, the offense is struggling right now, but they're going to get O'Neal Cruz back probably in the next 10 days. Connor Griffin's going to come back at the beginning of September. They just did a report on him that they said he's like a caged lion, like he's chomping at the bit to get back. Horowitz apparently got hit in the head during his rehab and now has a concussion, even though he was seen jumping up and down and celebrating their walk-off the other night. So I assume he's coming back. So the offense is going to get a little boost from those guys. So you're contenders this year. Now, you fritter away more games in Cincinnati this weekend, then I might change my tune. And I am worried after watching Arizona play, and depending what moves Arizona makes, they've got a nice ball club. They've got a nice ball club. Some decent pitching. I don't. They're going with Sewald as their closer, and they have this other kid that throws 100, 101. I think Sewald's not good. So we'll see if they look for back end bullpen help. But nonetheless, you can't assume Arizona. Look, you're 2 games out of it. The Phillies are slumping. I think they're tied with the Diamondbacks, so they're only 2 games out. So you're contenders this year. This isn't something that's not doable, especially with the offense that you have, and especially if you could get Paul Skeens to pitch consistently like Paul Skeens, to go with those other guys. You've got to make moves, but here we are. We're going to dilly dally around. They should be making moves right now. And I hope he shuts me up. I hope he proves me wrong, and starts to do some things. So, all right. I got one more rant. Spicoli, you still around? What's your problem? There he is. Need guard awake a little bit. All right, Penn State fans, I'm hopping back on this. I did it last week. Sorry for the repeat, but your buddy, my buddy, everyone's buddy, Pat Kraft, responded to the report, or not the report, but the comments by Mike Rhodes saying, "Hey, Penn State basketball is at the bottom of the Big Ten in NIL spending." First Pat Kraft came out and said, "I'm not an ATM machine." And then he followed up when he talked to the beat writers and said, I don't have a specific number And I don't think some of those numbers that you're hearing about Big Ten teams are accurate. And I don't really care where we rank in NIL spending. The money that we set aside for basketball should be sufficient for them to compete and be better. Almost like he's lobbing another volley back over the net at Mike Rhodes. Um, Mike Rhodes, if he was smart, would say, you know what? I was pretty darn successful at VCU. I'm getting the heck out of here. Even if I go back to a smaller school like VCU, I'll go back somewhere where I'm appreciated and where I'm given resources to compete at whatever level that is, whether it's a mid-major or whether it would be another, high major job. And again, I don't think Mike Rhodes will be mistaken for John Wooden, but I don't think he's a complete buffoon either. And you can't compete when you're not given the funds that everyone else that you're competing with is. But Pat Kraft said they can compete with the money that we're giving them. And if we were spending more, it would not be a good investment. What an idiot he is. So then the report later in the week, just a few days ago, came out what they're finding, or maybe it was before, but someone posted it again, what each sport was making or losing. Well, there are only two sports that make money, and that's football and men's basketball. And that's the same way at every other school. Okay. I said on my wall to wall podcast this week, there are three schools, Duke. I want to say it's Duke, Kentucky, and Carolina. I'm not. I think that's who it is, where they actually make more money off their basketball program than their football program. But I use Duke as an example. Duke has chosen to be competitive in football. And I think that's look, no one's suggesting that Pat Kraft needs to give Mike Rhodes or whoever the coach is at Penn State money to be a national title contender. I don't think that's the expectation, but the expectation is we'd like to be able to make the tournament at least every now and again, more than once every 5 or 6 years. We'd like to at least be in that, be on the bubble, with things. Not be a bottom feeder in the Big Ten. Be at least a middle of the pack team. That's what I think. That's what all the basketball fans at Penn State, and there are basketball fans at Penn State. Penn State University's never cared about their basketball program, and it's baffling when you look at those numbers. The wrestling team, I've said it. Look, much respect to the wrestling program. It is the best collegiate sports program in the country. It loses money. It does. You can see the books. All the other sports, baseball, volleyball, they lose money. So why would you not want to invest? If you can get your team into the NCAA tournament, you're going to make money. So, okay, it came out. I just read it before I started the podcast. The average Big Ten team in basketball spends $14 million on their roster. So to be up around the average, Penn State would have to spend $14 million. I saw the number $3 million at one point, but in that report, I forget who was reporting it, said that Penn State is suspected to be at about half that range, which then Mike Rhodes is correct. That puts them at the bottom of the barrel in the Big Ten if you're at half of the average Big Ten team. So let's say you spent $8 more million. Let's say you're spending $7 million this year. Let's say you gave him $8 more million. That gets him, depending on how you want to allot it, that gets him a star player, 2-star. And Penn State, look, here's the thing. Texas Tech football is a great example. Texas Tech football was a bottom feeder, or on a good year, they were average, a 7-5, 8-4 kind of team. Then they said, hey, this is a whole new world we're in. So if we got the money, kids will come here. If Penn State ponies up the money in basketball, it's no longer that excuse. Well, no kid, no, a lot of the inner city kids that are good at basketball don't want to come to little Mickey Mouse Rural State College. If you got the money, they will. If you've got the NIL money and you can offer up the money, you can build a program anywhere. Um, and so it's just it's if I had an AD say that, and let me tell you something, as a USC fan, I know what a bad athletic director looks like. I had to suffer through Mike Garrett, who, just like Pat Kraft with Matt Campbell, Mike Garrett lucked into Pete Carroll because the first three guys he wanted turned him down. And they would have been far, far worse than Pete Carroll. And of course, that, Pat Kraft, we know that fiasco with the Matt Campbell the eventual hire, which I think is really good. But he got lucky. So I suffered through Mike Garrett. Then I had to watch Pat Hayden just obliterate the athletic programs. And this one pained me. It pained me. Pat Hayden was, as a little kid when I started liking USC, he was one of the guys, the quarterback that I started watching. And my favorite all-time player, 1A and 1B, Troy Polamalu, Lynn Swan. And then Lynn Swan took over as AD, and he butchered it. And then Mike Bone, at first I was like, oh, they finally, okay, we're not hired an ex-USC player. Thank God. And Mike Bone's out there playing grab ass with the female staffers. So he was a buffoon. So trust me, Penn State fans, I'm not bashing on you. This is not Tim Clark bash on Penn State. I know what bad athletic directors look like. And this guy wants to be a fan. Oh, he wants to be on the football staff. He's a jackass. And I think he's a problem for Penn State. And the fact that he doesn't understand that men's basketball, albeit, and then there were people that said, well, why should he spend on it? No one cares about the basketball program. Remember the line from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. If you win, they will come. There's countless videos when Penn State had good teams, the court stormings, 10,000 people in that mausoleum they call a basketball arena. Don't tell me they won't show up. Now, Penn State gets screwed a lot on weekday 9 p.m. starts. They do have a fan base, a lot of them coming from the Harrisburg area, that just can't make it for a 9 p.m. Thursday night game. So I'm not suggesting every game would be sold out or, 8 to 10,000, but if you start winning your weekend games and the crowd, the students right now, there's a loyal base of students over there that are basketball fans, but the rest of them, they're walking around campus in Duke jerseys. So if you build a winner, now your student section, remember they moved the student section behind the bleachers or behind the benches because that was going to be what if there's only 50 kids there, it doesn't really matter. So there's so many things that would be good if you build a winning basketball program. Going back to USC, Jen Cohen's figured it out. And in fairness, Mike Bone before her, because when Andy Enfield was there, he brought in the Mobley boys, and he started building that program back up. And USC always had, but Penn State did too, like a year here and a year there, where they make a little run and get in the tournament, and sometimes make a run in the tournament. But USC is now it hasn't panned out for Musselman the first 2 years, but they've got a loaded roster this year because Jen Cohen said, if I can finally get people to show up to the Galen Center, and it's much, much harder in LA where there's 85 other things they could be doing. But I can make the basketball program can make me money. So I'm going to invest in the basketball program. It's also going to help. Football at Penn State right now is paying for all the other sports. If you can start making more money with your basketball program, you can filter some of that money down to help pay for some of the other sports rather than get rid of them, which is one of the topics at every university. How are we going to keep running, the lacrosse team or whatever it may be, the tennis team? So I found it to be a totally tone deaf and idiotic comment from a guy who is an idiot. So it shouldn't have surprised me, but you've got two moneymakers, Pat. And yes, I know football is your thing, and that's why you came there to win a national championship. You made that perfectly clear, and that's why James Franklin got fired. Which, by the way, again, there's no problem with that whatsoever. I thought it was dumb doing it mid-season, and that coaching search proved I was right on that. But aside from that, I mean, James Franklin had his chances. He was a used car salesman. He talked a big game, but he couldn't win the big game. Um, so I'm certainly not criticizing Kraft for making a change there, but he's I noticed they did tiers of Big Ten spending, and Penn State was in tier two. They're not in tier one of football spending NIL. Um, so I don't know. Look, they've got all kinds of donors over there. They keep raising tuition. And then people say, well, tuition money doesn't go to the sports programs. Well, okay, I get it. There's different buckets of money. I understand that. But let's face it, they're going to do what they have to do. But every school's got $1 million donors that are just itching to put their money in a winner. I don't know. I don't get this guy. And I certainly don't get his take um, on not wanting to have at least again, no one's asking you to win a national title, but making the tournament 2 out of 3 years or 3 out of 5 years, as opposed to 1 out of 5 years or 1 out of 7 years, um, shouldn't be too much to ask. And then the money that you make on basketball would increase, and help out the football money. But look, he's there and I'm sitting here. So what do I know? But I can't stand that guy. Anyway, off topic. So I just tried playing around with a couple things. Um, I have a culmination on my dog, the neighbor's dog pooping in my yard. Maybe I'll save that for next week. That ended up in an interesting situation. But I'm gonna do a couple TV reviews for you. Now, the first one, um, and both of these are getting released. Like, I like when they put it out there. Here are the 10 episodes, and I can just boom, 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 boom. Especially if it's something I'm super into. Both of these are weekly. I have to wait for the next week. And wait, it was that way with Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed, on Apple TV, which they set up for a season two, by the way, which I'm excited about. I like that show. But um, so the first one I started watching just the other day. I watched episode one, Game Day Murders on HBO Max. I like true crime stuff, even though it's kind of sad stories and in some cases gruesome stories. But I'm intrigued, by the way the legal process is handled and how the law enforcement goes about trying to solve the crimes and the motive and all that. I'm always intrigued by true crime. So episode one was about the Patrick Dennehy murder, at Baylor, and boy, does Dave Bliss. Not that I mean, Dave Bliss was already pretty much sent to purgatory, at least college basketball purgatory, but does he ever look bad? I never heard the tapes. I'm sure they've been played before in the news and stuff. The tapes that his assistant had a recorder, who I feel bad for, by the way. He's now an assistant warden at a prison in California because he was blackballed from coaching college basketball. He was the good guy in this situation. He was the one that said, "Hey, they're covering stuff up." And he made the recordings of Bliss. I'm not sure how he ended up being blackballed, unless there was something that they didn't say in the episode. But anyway, it was good stuff. It told a good story. It wasn't dreadfully long. I hate when they drag it out. It was I want to say maybe 45 minutes. I want to say. But it was a good story. I can't think of the gal that's doing it. She's the host of this, but it's going to be a recurring theme. Now there was another one, and I thought this was one I could binge watch. So the next thing that came on was about the murder of a Kentucky football player. They were partying at a house, and he was sitting on the porch, and et cetera, et cetera. He got shot. But that was a whole different show. But that's also a crime drama, and I didn't write that down what the name of that one is. But if you're into true crime, HBO's got at least a couple, and I think they have. I think I didn't get to watch this. The Idaho, um, where those girls were murdered in their house by the guy that then drove cross country with his dad. Um, so some good stuff on HBO Max if you're into true crime. The other show that I'm really into right now is a show called Lucky. Um, on Apple TV. I like some of the stuff on Apple TV. I had not been an Apple member. I think I told the story. I joined to watch a Pirate game, um, and and then I start, and there was, there's some good stuff on there. But Lucky, I like. Timothy Oliphant is in it, and I have liked pretty much everything he's been in, starting with Justified. Walter Goggins, another guy I've liked everything he's been in. Was his co-star in Justified? They were actually Oliphant was the sheriff, or deputy, maybe it was, and Goggins was the bad guy. But they've been high school friends growing up. So that was a really good show. If you've never watched that, that's one to binge. Justified, definitely. I couldn't recommend anything higher. But Oliphant is actually kind of a side character. He's not one of the main characters. Annette Bening, who I haven't seen in a long time in a program or a movie, is also one of the stars of this. Um, and Joy somebody is the main character, Lucky. But it's really good. Again, it's week to week, so I'd rather it be bingeable, but you have to wait till the next week to get the next episode. But it's a drama. There's honestly, all of the characters should be behind bars. They've all done something criminal, but Lucky is the one that's the least criminal, and you're rooting for her to get out. And even though Timothy Oliphant's in prison, you're kind of hoping, and he's Lucky's dad, so you're kind of hoping the two of them win in the end. And Annette Bening is she's the bad guy in all this, the bad woman in this, and so you're rooting against her. But it's a really good show. A lot of some action, some drama, but I would recommend if you haven't started watching Lucky on Apple TV, that's one that you can tune into. All right, that will do it. Boy, Spicoli, he's going to have to go out and ease his mind a little bit. I overused him this week. A lot of stuff to rant about. People annoying me this week. So if you're a Major League Baseball fan, I hope your team, if they're buyers, I hope they get someone that will help your team. Unless they're competing against the Pirates, then I hope they don't. And I hope Ben Charrington surprises me, and it would be a surprise, and pulls off some trades that are like the Brandon Lau trade he made in the offseason, which was certainly an excellent trade because the Pirates need a little help to get them boosted back in the right direction here before it's too late. So enjoy your trade deadline, enjoy the games, and as always, you know the drill. Be nice to one another.